The room fell so quiet you could hear a heartbeat. A massive steel door stood open, numbers still glowing on the keypad. The billionaire stopped smiling. The guards froze. And the girl everyone had ignored stepped back, whispering that she was sorry, because she hadn't meant to solve it. She just couldn't help seeing the pattern. Before we go back and understand how that moment even became possible, take a second to join the Kindness Tales family. If stories about unexpected kindness and human connection move you, tap subscribe, leave a like, and share what you're thinking in the comments. Now let me tell you how a joke turned into something no one in that room would ever forget. She grew up in a narrow apartment wedged between a closed-down laundromat and a discount store in a struggling neighborhood on the edge of a big American city. The paint on the walls peeled no matter how often her mother tried to fix it, and the heat sometimes went out in winter. Her mom worked double shifts at a nursing home, coming home exhausted but still smiling, still asking about homework, still believing tomorrow could be better. Money was always tight, but love wasn't. What they didn't have in comfort, they made up for in quiet resilience. At school, she learned early how to stay invisible. Teachers rarely called on her, not because she wasn't smart, but because she never raised her hand. Kids teased her thrift store clothes and worn backpack. She found safety in the library, where numbers and puzzles didn't care where you came from. Math made sense when nothing else did. Patterns calmed her. When life felt chaotic, numbers stayed honest. She didn't tell anyone how she solved puzzle books meant for adults, or how she memorized bus schedules just by glancing at them once. She didn't talk about the way her mind automatically searched for order in everything. She just listened, watched, and learned. One afternoon, everything shifted in the smallest way. Her school was selected for a citywide enrichment program sponsored by a famous tech billionaire known for his flashy interviews and bold promises. He loved telling people that anyone could succeed if they worked hard enough. As part of the program, a few students would tour his downtown headquarters. The teachers picked students with good grades and leadership qualities. Somehow, almost as an afterthought, her name made the list. She almost didn't go. The permission slip sat on the table for days because she knew her mom would have to rearrange a work shift just to sign it. But when her mother finally read it, she smiled in that tired, hopeful way and said opportunities don't knock twice. They made it work. The building they visited looked like something from another world. Glass walls, polished floors, and screens glowing with information she barely understood but deeply admired. She felt out of place in her worn sneakers, but she kept her head up. During the tour, the billionaire himself appeared, surrounded by executives and cameras. He spoke loudly, confidently, cracking jokes about success and genius. At one point, they gathered in a private conference room. At the far end stood a massive steel safe, sleek and intimidating. Someone asked what it was for. The billionaire laughed and said it held some of his most important documents and valuables. Then he joked that if anyone could open it, he'd give them $100 million on the spot. The room erupted in laughter. It was clearly meant as a flex, a show of confidence. The safe, he said, was uncrackable. Most students laughed along. Some whispered about what they'd buy with that kind of money. She didn't laugh. She stared at the keypad, at the faint smudges around certain numbers, at the rhythm of how the billionaire tapped it when he demonstrated locking it again. Her heart started racing, not with greed, but with curiosity. Her mind began quietly arranging pieces. She tried to ignore it. This wasn't her place. She was just a kid from a poor neighborhood on a school trip. But the numbers kept lining up in her head. She thought about how people choose codes, how habits form, how patterns repeat. She remembered something the billionaire had said earlier about anniversaries and milestones. The answer felt obvious in a way that scared her. Without really deciding to, she raised her hand. The room went quiet. The billionaire looked amused and asked if she had a question. Her voice shook as she said she thought the code might be a date. More laughter. He smiled and told her to go ahead and try, clearly expecting a harmless moment before moving on. She walked to the safe, hands trembling. She punched in the numbers she couldn't stop seeing. The keypad beeped once. Then again. The lock clicked. That's where the room fell silent, where smiles vanished, where disbelief took over. No alarms blared. No tricks were revealed. The door slowly swung open, exposing neatly stacked documents and a velvet-lined shelf inside. She stepped back immediately, apologizing over and over, saying she didn't mean to. She hadn't touched anything. She just saw it. The billionaire stared at the open safe like it had betrayed him. The executives whispered urgently. Someone quickly shut the door and reset the lock. Cameras were turned off. What was meant as a joke had become a problem. Security escorted her out of the room, not roughly, but firmly. She thought she was in trouble. She thought she'd embarrassed her school, her mother, herself. Sitting alone in a waiting area, she fought tears, replaying the moment again and again, wondering why she hadn't just stayed quiet like she always did. After what felt like forever, the billionaire walked in alone and sat across from her. Without the cameras, without the crowd, he looked different. Older. Quieter. He asked her how she did it. She tried to explain, stumbling over words, embarrassed by how simple it sounded. She talked about patterns, about how people reuse meaningful numbers, about how the keypad marks told a story. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked about her life. Where she lived. What her mother did. What she wanted to be. No one had ever asked her those questions with real interest before. When she said she loved math but didn't know how she'd ever afford college, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. The $100 million had been a joke, he admitted. A careless one. He couldn't just hand that over. But he also couldn't ignore what she'd done. More importantly, he couldn't ignore who she was. That day didn't end with headlines or viral videos. It ended quietly, with a handshake and a promise. He arranged a full scholarship to a private school that specialized in advanced STEM education. He set up a trust to cover college, wherever she chose to go. He offered her mother a new job in one of his company's healthcare initiatives, with better hours and benefits. He didn't do it for publicity. In fact, he asked that her name never be shared. He said the world already had enough stories about him. This one was about her. Years passed. The girl who once tried to stay invisible grew into a young woman who no longer apologized for her mind. She studied engineering, then data science. She interned, failed, learned, and tried again. She never forgot where she came from, or how close she'd been to staying silent that day. She also never forgot the lesson hidden inside that locked safe. Not about money, but about attention. About what happens when someone finally notices potential instead of appearances. The billionaire changed too, in quieter ways. He stopped making jokes about impossible things. He invested more in public education programs, especially in underfunded communities. When asked why, he once said he'd learned that brilliance doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits in the back, waiting for someone to stop laughing long enough to listen. Today, the impact of that moment continues to ripple outward. A mother who once worked endless shifts now mentors other parents. A young woman who once felt unseen now builds systems meant to protect people, not lock them out. And a story that could have ended in embarrassment became one of trust, humility, and kindness. What lingers most isn't the image of a safe opening, but of a door opening inside people's minds. A reminder that kindness isn't always soft or obvious. Sometimes it's choosing to believe someone who doesn't look like what you expect. Sometimes it's turning a mistake into an opportunity. Sometimes it's simply listening. If this story leaves you with anything, let it be this. The world is full of locked doors, and even more full of people who hold the keys without knowing it. A little patience, a little humility, and a little kindness can change the course of a life. If you've ever experienced or witnessed a moment like that, share it in the comments. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear today.